Hello, in this session we are going to discuss how to get trip report. So into the software, based on the objects that are added, the number of multiple trips that have been driven and occurred, that information will be reflected as in a software. The trip that is considered, that is ignition on and ignition off, is considered as a trip into the software. So let's check this option that is available in the report, in activity and into trip. So currently we are onto the summary screen of the trip report, where the information that will be available, that is which vehicle have been driven by which driver, accordingly it is in which company and a branch. Based on that, the IMEI number will be appeared. Accordingly, what was the total distance that has been traveled by this object, that will be reflected for that particular date selection, that is from date and a to date time with that time. Accordingly, what is the running time durations at that particular trip, what was the idling that was done at that moment, and accordingly what was the stop durations in that trip. Now based on the trip summary informations with its running, idle and stop information, there are the other parameters, that is when the ignition was on at that time, that date and time information will reflected. At what location the ignition was got on, that information, its location parameter will reflected. Accordingly, when was the ignition, last ignition was got off, so that information parameters will get reflected. Accordingly, what was the locations where the ignition was got off, that parameter will get reflected. And accordingly, into that trip, what was the average speed that was driven by the driver, that informations will be reflected in the average parameter. And based on that, the maximum number of overspeeding or maximum speed that was being done by the driver, that informations will be reflected in a max parameter. And accordingly, whether there was any overspeeding done in that trip, that information will be reflected in a count, as a count. And accordingly, what was the total number of alerts that were generated into the trip, that information will be reflected with the total alert type and its count on it. And based on that, the total number of a trip that was done for a particular selected date and a time will get reflected. Accordingly, based on that, the playback that will be available for the selected date and time. So now the filters that are selected for the record, that is as per your convenience, you can select the company, branch, vehicle group, type, brand and a model. Now apart from that, the other option that is available for this report, that is trip calculation for. So based on the ignition selection in the system, into the sensor, based on the ignition on and off event, the system will consider one as a trip into the software. And if we check for the speed consideration, in that case, whenever the ignition ports are not connected, or in that case if you want to view the report based on the speed, that is when the vehicle start running according to the rule that you have set for a speed consideration moment in reseller rule as well as company rule, accordingly system will consider that particular vehicle as a running into the trip. And based on a trip that gets started with its speed, and when the data for the GPS records are below the speed consideration movement, then in that case one trip is considered based on a speed. So that is how the speed as well as the ignition selections can be done for the trip calculation to view the report as well. So based on that, the date selection can be done, and based on vehicle selection. So record for the summary will get appeared. Accordingly, in the case based on the summary record, if you want to view the detailed information, then that is available as well. So when you double click this record, the detailed informations of the trip for a particular date will get appeared. That is for which what was the starting time, that is total number of a trip that was generated will be appeared first of all. And accordingly at what time, that is start time and start location will get appear. What was the starting odometer, starting coordinates. Likewise for the end information will be reflected, that is the end time and a date, and location, and odometer, and coordinates, driver informations, total number of a distance that has been traveled for a particular trip, that information will be reflected. Accordingly, based on that, what was the running duration time, that will be reflected with hour and a minute format. Accordingly, what was the idling that was done for a particular that trip, that information, and accordingly stop information. Now the total distance will be appeared according to the information that is fetched into the record. That is based on the sum informations of the total distance, the total informations of the distance will get appeared. Now accordingly, what was the average speed that was been driven by the driver, that information will be reflected. What was the max speed driven at that trip, that information, so the max speed will be reflected. Accordingly, whether there were any overspeeding, then the count of the overspeeding will appear on in the overspeed parameter. And based on that, the alert numbers will reflected based on the total alert that has been generated. That is types of the alert and its count with the total amount of a number of alert with total distance as well. So accordingly, in the case, if you want to get the other information, that is for which particular vehicle you are viewing the record for, that information is available as well. That is its object number and a name, what is the IMEI number, and a from date time and a to date time. Now, based on these trip records, in the case if you want to view the trip where exactly the records on a map that has playback for that trip, then you can click on the show path. So when you click on the show path, the system will show you the path for that particular trip that was been done. So that information will be reflected into playback. So here you can find the information, that is the starting point for the start time and ending point will be reflected, and you can play the playback as well to view the path of that trip. Now, accordingly, based on that, in case if any odometer reset have been occurred at that time, then the odometer reset values will get appeared. Accordingly, the odometer values will get changed in the odometer parameters. So this is how the trip report works in the software and are available. Thank you.